Dear students, in this session we will discuss what is there in page number 132. Here Peter Barry makes a comparison between post-colonial criticism and feminist criticism. The comparison is made between the phases of post-colonial criticism with the three phases of feminist criticism. In the previous sessions, we have already seen the three phases of post-colonial criticism: the adopt, the adapt, and the adapt phases of post-colonial criticism. These phases are being compared with the similar developmental phases of feminist criticism. That is what we see in this paragraph. If the three stages mentioned earlier, adopt, adapt, and adapt, provide a way of seeing post-colonial literature, then a way of seeing the stages of post-colonial criticism would be to suggest, as we have been doing, that they closely parallel the developmental stages of feminist criticism. Now comes the explanation. In its earliest phase, which is to say before it was known as such, post-colonial criticism took as its main subject matter white representations of colonial countries and criticized these for their limitations and their biases. So this is what post-colonial criticism has done. They had adopted the European styles. Post-colonial criticism took as its main subject matter white representations of colonial countries and criticized these for their limitations and their bias. Thus, critics would discuss the representation of Africa in Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness or of India in E.M. Forster's A Passage to India, or of Algeria in Albert Camus' The Outsider. These are the representative texts of the first phase of post-colonial literatures. So, here we see the critics discussing the representation of the colonies with the help of the European white representations. Thus, the Africa we see in Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. India we see in E.M. Forster's Passage to India. About Algeria we see in Albert Camus' The Outsider. This corresponds to the early 1970s phase of feminist criticism, when the subject matter was the representation of women by male novelists like D.H. Lawrence or Henry Miller. The classic instance is Kate Millett's Sexual Politics. So the first phase, that is the adopt phase of post-colonialism, is compared with the first developmental phase of feminist criticism, where women are represented through the eyes of the male writers. So that is becoming the study of the feminist criticism in the first phase, how women are getting represented through the male voice. The same thing had occurred in post-colonialism also. In post-colonialism, the colonies are getting represented in the voice of the white or in the Eurocentric standards and styles. So this is the first phase, the comparison of the first phase with the first phase of feminist literary criticism. So there are two references that we have to make. One reference is with regard to D.H. Lawrence, the other is Kate Millett. Who are they? It is there given in your notes. D.H. Lawrence, from 1885 to 1930, controversial modernist British novelist known for his blatant portrayal of sexuality in works like Lady Chatterley's Lover, Sons and Lovers, and Women in Love. Henry Miller, an American writer noted for his taboo-breaking works like Tropic of Cancer, Black Spring, and Plexus. Kate Millett, an American feminist theoretician, the groundbreaking work Sexual Politics is an intense study of the politics of gender, especially the subjugation of women that can even be seen in literary works of so-called great male writers. So here, in the first phase of feminist criticism, the feminist critic, they tend to make an analysis of the females as represented in the works of D.H. Lawrence, Henry Miller, and Kate Millett. Because all these writers, they are representing female experience as seen through the eyes of the male. So this is the first phase of feminist development. Now we are moving to the second phase of comparison. The second phase of postcolonial criticism involved a turn towards explorations of themselves and their society by postcolonial writers. At this stage, a celebration and exploration of diversity, hybridity, and difference become central. This is the stage when, in the title of the well-known pioneering work in this field, The Empire Writes Back. I don't know you remember or not. The Empire Writes Back is a very famous text written by Bill Ashcroft. It is referred to in the first paragraph of a chapter. So here there is a reference made to that text, and also there is a note given in your page. And what is that note? This phrase was originally used by Salman Rushdie. It was not originally used by Bill Ashcroft, it was used by Salman Rushdie. He was punning on The Empire Strikes Back, a famous American TV show. Salman Rushdie took this title from the title of a TV show, and the title of the TV show was The Empire Strikes Back, and it is given there in the article. The title of the article is also given in the notes. So here what is happening in the second phase, we see a mingling of the native cultures or the culture of the colonized in the writings of the postcolonial literatures, along with the style of the colonizer. So there we see a kind of hybridity, a kind of exploration of diversity. This is the stage when the title of the well-known pioneering work in this field, The Empire Writes Back. This corresponds to a phase in feminist criticism, that is the second phase in feminist criticism. This corresponds to the gynotext phase of feminist criticism. And what is the speciality of that phase in feminist criticism? When there is a turn towards the exploration of female experience and identities in books by women. Gynotext, books by women, texts by women. So in the second phase of feminist criticism, critics began to analyze the female experiences as written by the female writers. And this is compared to the adapt phase of postcolonial criticism. Now we move on to the third phase of comparison. The analogy between these two types of criticism might be pushed a little further. These two types of criticism here refers to postcolonial criticism and feminist criticism. so that a parallel might also be perceived with the split in feminist criticism between theoretical and empirical versions as suggested above. Thus, in postcolonial criticism, we might see a split between variants very directly influenced by deconstruction and post-structuralism, such as the work of Homi Bhabha and work like Says, which accepts a good deal from liberal humanism, is written in a more accessible way and seems perhaps to lend itself more directly to political engagement. So now we come to the third phase. And what was the third phase of postcolonial criticism? It was the adept phase. Adept phase in the sense, the liberated, skillful postcolonial writer. There we see a declaration of cultural independence. And that adept phase is here getting compared with the third phase of feminist criticism. And what is happening in this adept phase? In the adept phase, actually, more connections are attached with different types of criticism to postcolonial criticism. The postcolonial criticism is making interconnections with post-structuralism, deconstruction, etc. And such connections are also being made in the field of feminist criticism also in its third phase. So that is what we see in this third phase. Let me read. The analogy between these two types of criticism might be pushed a little further so that a parallel might be perceived with the split in feminist criticism between theoretical and empirical versions as suggested above. So in feminist criticism also, the shift or the focus is changing a little bit, and it tries to make connections with other aspects of literary criticism. Thus, in postcolonial criticism, we might see a split between variants very directly influenced by deconstruction and post-structuralism. So, such a split we also find in postcolonial criticism. It is taking part with other forms of literary criticism such as deconstruction and post-structuralism. And we see the works of Homi Bhabha and also the works of Edward Said. They all are making connections with the different other literary approaches, different other critical approaches to their text, such as the work of Homi Bhabha and the work like Edward Said's, which accepts a good deal from liberal humanism, is written in a more accessible way and seems perhaps to lend itself more directly to political engagement. So in the third phase, both the postcolonial criticism and feminist criticism, they are becoming more political, engaged with more different aspects of literary criticisms, different styles of literary criticism, and there is more interconnectedness. We will wind up this session here. We will continue our chapter in the next session. Thank you.